In Chicago's industrial district, the cold November wind swept the smoke from the steel factory chimneys. Elijah Brooks' old pickup slowed toward the crowd of workers gathered in front of the steelworks factory's massive gates. He had come here to search for Robert Miller, who had been missing for 5 days. Beside him, Shadow, a loyal German shepherd with black and grey fur, sat quietly watching his surroundings. "This is where they last saw Robert," Elijah said softly. About 200 workers had gathered in front of the factory gate. They held signs reading, "We demand fair wages. Workers' rights are human rights. Bring Miller back." The last sign caught Elijah's attention. A voice rose from the crowd. "Where's Robert?" "Tell us." Factory security guards had tightly sealed the door. Uniformed men watched the workers from a distance. Elijah got out of the car. Shadow followed him, his sense of smell immediately scanning the surroundings. This was not just a factory. It was a battlefield thick with tension and anger. "Mr. Brooks." Elijah turned at the sound. Janet Miller was approaching, a woman of about 45, anxious but strong-looking. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was determination in her gaze. "Thank you so much for coming," Janet said breathlessly. "Can you find Robert?" "The police aren't doing anything." Shadow sniffed Janet and wagged his tail. The dog sensed sincerity. "I'll do my best," Elijah said calmly. "Can you tell me again when Robert was last seen?" Janet took a deep breath. 5 days ago, Wednesday evening. There was a workers' meeting in front of the factory. Robert was going to announce the strike decision. After the meeting, no one saw him. "Is anything missing from the house?" "No, his phone is at home, his car is in the garage, even his wallet is in the drawer. It's as if he vanished into thin air." Elijah scanned the area. The workers were still chanting slogans, but some of them looked at him and approached curiously. "Hello, I'm Tony Rizzo," said an elderly worker. He was about 60 years old, a man with a handshake like steel. Robert's closest friend. "I was there that night too. What did you see?" Elijah asked. Robert gave the final speech. "We won't stop until we get our rights," he said. After the meeting, everyone dispersed. Robert walked toward the street where his car was parked. But his car was found at home. Shadow sniffed the spot where the speech had been given and pressed his nose to the ground. The dog had picked up a scent. "This is Robert's," Janet said, her eyes brimming. "But how did it get here?" Tony asked. "I've never seen Robert come down this street." Shadow scanned the area. The dog had picked up other scents, foreign scents. "Someone brought it here," Elijah said, and his hat fell off. Just then, a black sedan slowly drove down the end of the street. The people inside were watching them. Shadow immediately perked up and growled softly in the car's direction. "Do you recognize that car?" Elijah asked. Tony frowned. "No, but I've been seeing cars like that a lot lately. They're always watching us. Who are they?" "We don't know. But factory management is very upset about the strike." "Maybe they hired private security." Janet began to tremble. "So they did something to Robert?" "We don't know yet," Elijah said in a soothing tone. "But Shadow will find the trail." The dog was indeed working. He sniffed Robert's hat thoroughly, then began searching for more scents around him. "Did you bring any of Robert's clothes?" Elijah asked Janet. "Yes, in the car." Janet ran and brought a bag from the pickup. Inside was the shirt Robert wore most often. Shadow sniffed the shirt and committed the scent to memory. Then he began walking with determined steps. The trail led them to the heart of Chicago, the city center. Shadow showed no hesitation, as if he could see Robert's path like a map. "Where is he going?" Janet asked. "I don't know," Elijah said. "But Shadow definitely knows." An hour later, they arrived in an area with luxury office buildings. Shadow stopped in front of a large skyscraper. "Consolidated Steel Industries," Tony read the building's sign. "This is the main company of the steelworks. Why would Robert come here?" Janet asked. Shadow circled the building. The dog stopped at the back entrance and barked. "Here," Elijah said. Robert went in through this door. The building's security guard had noticed them. He approached. "What are you looking for here?" "We're looking for a missing person," Elijah said. "Robert Miller. The trail leads here. I don't know anyone like that. Get out of here." But Shadow kept growling. The dog had a definite scent on his nose. "Robert is definitely here," Elijah insisted. The security guard became uneasy. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Elijah said calmly. "So we'd like to see them too." At that moment, A silhouette appeared in a window on one of the upper floors of the building. Someone was watching them. Shadow raised his head and barked. The dog was pointing at that window. "There's someone there," said Tony. But the silhouette vanished immediately. "Could Robert be there?" whispered Janet. "He could be," said Elijah. "Shadow is never wrong." The security guard grabbed his radio. "Headquarters, we have a problem here. Several people are loitering around our building." Elijah looked at him. "We're not committing any crime. We're just looking for a missing person. This is private property. You can't stay here without permission." Shadow made a different move at that moment. The dog circled the building and stopped at the parking lot in the back. There was a sedan similar to Robert's car. "Isn't that Robert's car?" Tony asked. Janet approached. "Yes, it even has the same license plate. But how is that possible?" "The car was found at home. Spare key," Elijah said. "Someone took the car from the house and brought it here." Shadow circled the car, picking up strong scents. "Robert came in this car," Elijah said. "But he didn't come of his own free will." Janet began to panic. "What do you mean?" "Someone brought him here by force." Just then, two men in suits emerged from the building's entrance. When they saw Elijah and Janet, they approached quickly. "What are you doing here?" one of the men asked sharply. "Looking for a missing person," Elijah said. "The trail leads here." "Nonsense. No one is missing." Shadow made a very distinct movement at that moment. He looked at the back window of the building and barked. For a very brief moment, Robert Miller's face appeared in that window. "Robert!" Janet shouted. "He's there!" But the window closed immediately. The men in suits looked at each other in panic. "You didn't see anything," said one of the men in a threatening voice. "I did," said Tony firmly. "Robert was there." "I'm calling the police," said Janet, taking out her phone. The men tried to stop her, but Elijah stepped in. "Don't touch her." Shadow stood beside Elijah and began to growl. "This is a misunderstanding," said one of the men. "There's no one here." "Then let's check with the police," said Elijah. The men looked helplessly at each other. Then one spoke into his radio. "Operation cancelled." "I repeat, operation cancelled." "What operation?" asked Elijah. The man didn't answer, but it was enough information for Shadow. The dog ran to the building's entrance and began barking. 15 minutes later, the police arrived. Detective Rodriguez, about 40 years old, looking experienced, began investigating the situation. "We have a missing person report," said the detective. "Robert Miller. Missing for 5 days. We saw him at that window," said Janet. "The dog is pointing him out." Shadow was still standing at the building's entrance, eager to go inside. "Do you have a search warrant?" The detective asked the men in suits. "No," they said quickly. "This is private property." "Then we'll get a search warrant." "Wait," said one of the men, panicking. Maybe there's been a misunderstanding." Detective Rodriguez frowned. "What kind of misunderstanding?" "Mr. Miller, he came here himself. To negotiate." "Negotiate what?" "The strike. He wanted to make a deal." Janet was furious. "Robert would never make a deal to break the strike." "But he did," said the man. "And now?" "He wants time to think." "Where is he?" asked the detective sharply. The men reluctantly allowed them to go upstairs. Shadow continued to follow them the whole way. On the 12th floor in a small office, they found Robert Miller. He was tied to a chair but unharmed. When he opened his eyes, he didn't relax at the sight of his wife. "Janet, how did you get here?" "Thanks to Mr. Brooks and Shadow," said Janet, hugging her husband. Detective Rodriguez arrested the men in suits. "Illegal detention, false imprisonment. After Robert was rescued, the real story came out. They took me by force," said Robert. "They tried to bargain with me to stop the strike. When I refused, they started holding me here." "Who are they?" asked Elijah. "Consolidated Steel's private security team. The company is doing everything to end the strike." Shadow sat beside Robert, wagging his tail. "Another successful mission completed." "We never would have found you without Shadow," said Janet. "Petting the dog." "This dog is a miracle," said Tony. "I don't understand how he found Robert." Elijah smiled. "Shadow's just doing his job, finding missing people." Detective Rodriguez was taking notes. "This case is going to be big. Company management is facing serious charges." That evening, Robert was home safe. The strike had been won. After the scandal of Robert's kidnapping broke, the company was forced to reach an agreement with the workers. Elijah and Shadow had completed their mission. But the road lay ahead. There was a news report on the radio. The investigation continues into the discovery of fisherman Joseph Washington's body on the riverbank in Louisiana. While local authorities do not consider the incident suspicious, the family's lawyer thinks differently. Shadow pricked up his ears. He looked at Elijah. "New assignment, Shadow?" Elijah asked. The dog wagged his tail. They were going to Louisiana. The night Robert Miller was rescued, the Chicago police launched a comprehensive investigation into Consolidated Steel Industries. Detective Rodriguez laid out the evidence gathered with the help of Elijah and Shadow. "This isn't just a kidnapping case," Detective Janet Miller said. "The company is systematically trying to intimidate its workers." Elijah sat in the motel room, petting Shadow. The dog seemed calm, but Elijah knew he was still on edge. "Good work, buddy," Elijah said. "But this case isn't over yet." Early the next morning, Janet called. "Mr. Brooks, I spoke with Robert. He wants to tell you something very important." An hour later, they met at Miller's house. Robert, his wife Janet, and his friend Tony Rizzo were waiting in the living room. Robert looked a little tired but determined. "Mr. Brooks, I have to tell you the truth," Robert said. "Consolidated Steel didn't just kidnap me. They're trying to intimidate other workers too." "How?" Elijah asked. "Last month, someone broke into my friend Mike Davidson's house. Nothing was stolen, but the strike documents disappeared." Tony added, "My car was sabotaged too. The brakes failed. Luckily, we noticed before there was an accident." "Does the police know about these incidents?" Elijah asked. "We reported them, but they said they couldn't take it seriously. They said it was coincidence." Shadow sat next to Robert, listening intently. The dog sensed this family was still in danger. "We need more evidence," Elijah said. "Shadow might be able to help." That afternoon, they returned to the steelworks factory. This time, the workers were more hopeful. Robert's safe return had emboldened them all. "This time we'll win," said Tony. "Now we know what the company is doing." As Shadow roamed around the factory, he picked up a strange smell. The dog led Elijah to the back of the factory, to the waste storage area. "What did you find, Shadow?" asked Elijah. The dog stopped next to a metal container and growled. There were sounds coming from inside. Elijah opened the lid. Inside were electronic devices, recording devices, listening equipment. "What does this mean?" asked Robert. "They're listening to you," said Elijah, "recording your meetings, your conversations." Tony was furious. "That's illegal." "Yes, but it needs to be proven." Shadow sniffed and examined the devices. The dog picked up other scents too, familiar scents. "Shadow can track the people using these devices," Elijah said. The trail led them to another office building in the city center. This time there was a Global Security Solutions sign. "A private security company," Elijah said. "Consolidated Steel probably owns these." They didn't go inside, but Shadow gathered more information by circling the building. The dog also examined the cars waiting in the parking lot. "Some of these cars were seen near Mike's house," Tony said. Elijah took photos and noted the license plate numbers. "We'll give these to the police." In the evening, they met with Detective Rodriguez. They showed him the evidence they had gathered. "This is a major scandal," said the detective. "Let's inform federal authorities." "The FBI?" asked Janet. "Yes, violating workers' rights is a federal crime. There are also interstate company activities involved." 2 days later, FBI agents arrived in Chicago. Agent Sarah Williams, about 40 years old, serious and professional, led the operation. "Mr. Brooks, I've been following your work in Phoenix," Agent Williams said. "Your dog's abilities are impressive. Shadow always finds the right path," Elijah said. "We need your help in this case too." The FBI conducted an extensive investigation over 3 days. Thanks to the evidence Shadow found, the connection between Consolidated Steel and Global Security was proven. "The company paid this security firm $50,000, said Agent Williams, "to monitor and intimidate the workers." "What can be done legally?" asked Robert. "The company executives will be arrested. The workers will also be compensated." A week later, Consolidated Steel's CEO and senior executives were indicted in federal court. The company was forced to settle with the workers. "The strike was won," said Tony happily. "And now no one can intimidate us anymore." Robert thanked Elijah. "Without you, we would never have learned the truth." "Without Shadow, I couldn't have done anything either," Elijah said, petting his dog. "That dog is a real hero," Janet said. "How many families did he give hope to?" That evening in the motel room, Elijah was lost in thought. The Chicago case was closed, But there was other news on the radio. The mysterious death of fisherman Joseph Washington in Louisiana continues to be debated, said the news anchor. While local police don't consider the accident suspicious, the family's lawyer is demanding an independent investigation. Shadow lay next to Elijah, listening to the radio. The dog pricked up his ears. Another job? Elijah asked Shadow. The dog looked at him and wagged his tail. All right, buddy. We're going to Louisiana. The next morning, as they left Chicago, they passed in front of the steelworks factory. The workers were at their posts, working confidently. A happy ending, Elijah said. Everyone wins. Shadow looked out the window, thinking about the new adventure. As the pickup headed towards Louisiana, Elijah remembered Robert Miller's last words. Mr. Brooks, you and Shadow didn't just save me. You protected the rights of all the workers. That is true justice, justice. The word echoed in Elijah's mind. Together with Shadow, they pursued injustice wherever it existed. And the road was taking them to Louisiana, to a new mystery. The news continued on the radio. The Washington family's lawyer is drawing attention to the threats the fisherman faced before his death. Was the land dispute Joseph mentioned really just a coincidence? The question lingered in their minds. Shadow pricked up his ears. A new mission was beginning. Are you ready, Shadow? Elijah asked. The dog barked. He was always ready. As Chicago's skyline faded behind them, Elijah and Shadow continued their fight against injustice. Because wherever there was injustice, there had to be heroes to stop it, and they were always there. If this story gives you hope, don't forget to subscribe. Share in the comments which issues of injustice affect you the most. The FBI's Chicago operation had begun to expand on its third day. Agent Sarah Williams's federal investigation team was uncovering the extent of the Consolidated Steel scandal. Thanks to the evidence Shadow had found, Elijah and Shadow met with Agent Williams at the police station they had converted into the FBI's temporary headquarters. There were hundreds of documents, photographs, and recording devices on the table. Mr. Brooks, those listening devices Shadow found taught us a lot, said Agent Williams. Consolidated Steel is conducting similar operations not just in Chicago, but nationwide. Elijah frowned. What do you mean? Detroit, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, same methods everywhere. Intimidating labor leaders, breaking strikes, sabotaging union activities. Shadow sat beside the table listening to Agent Williams. The dog sensed this woman was sincere. How many people have been affected? Elijah asked. 47 cases have been identified so far. Robert Miller is just one of them. At that moment, the door opened and Detective Rodriguez entered. Tony Rizzo and other workers were with him. Agent Williams, we got some important information from the workers, Detective Rodriguez said. Tony stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, do you remember us? We have something very important to tell you. Of course, Tony, what did you learn? We talked to our friends in other cities. Jim Patterson disappeared in Detroit 6 months ago. There was a night raid on Maria Gonzalez's house in Pittsburgh. Always the same methods. Agent Williams was taking notes. This is a federal crime network. We'll investigate under the RICO Act. Elijah knew RICO, racketeering influenced and corrupt organizations, the law against organized crime. So this isn't just about labor rights, Elijah said. It's organized crime. Exactly. Consolidated Steel, Global Security, and other companies are working together. Shadow suddenly stood up and walked toward the door. The dog had heard cars outside. What is it, Shadow? Elijah asked. The dog growled softly. Unfamiliar people were approaching. Agent Williams grabbed his radio. Security situation report. Ma'am, there are suspicious vehicles around our building. The license plates can't be read. What do you mean? Fake plates. And the windows are very dark. We can't see inside. Elijah looked at Shadow. The dog was still tense. They're watching us, Elijah said. Shadow senses danger. Agent Williams went to the window. 3 black sedans were parked on the street. How long have these cars been here? They arrived 10 minutes ago, security said over the radio. Run a license plate check. We tried, ma'am. The system says no record found. Tony grew concerned. Are these Consolidated Steel's people? Probably, said Agent Williams, but they can't stop us now. The federal investigation has begun. Shadow approached the window and watched outside intently. The dog saw movement inside one of the cars. Agent Williams, Elijah said. Shadow noticed something. There's someone in that car. Agent Williams looked through binoculars. "You're right. Someone's watching us. What are you going to do?" "We'll try to apprehend them." Agent Williams spoke into his radio. "All units engage suspicious vehicles. Question the drivers." The FBI agents exited the building and approached the black sedans, but the cars sped away. "They got away," said Agent Williams. "But we'll catch them with the license plate cameras." Elijah wasn't reassured. "These people won't give up. They'll try other ways. You may be right, but you're under federal protection now." That night, Elijah and Shadow stayed at a secure safe house. They were under FBI protection. Shadow seemed uneasy. The dog kept checking the windows, listening for suspicious noises outside. "Calm down, buddy," Elijah said. "The FBI is protecting us." But Shadow's concern proved justified. At midnight, the sound of engines could be heard around the house. Elijah woke up and looked out the window. The FBI car waiting on the street was gone. "This isn't good," he muttered. Shadow was already up, ready. The dog headed for the door and growled very softly. Elijah called Agent Williams. "Agent Williams, the guards aren't here." "What? That's impossible. Charlie's team should be there. There are no FBI cars on the street. We're coming right now. Don't leave the building," but it was too late. Footsteps were heard at the door. Someone was fiddling with the lock. Shadow moved to the door and growled softly. Elijah went back into the room and opened the window. "Shadow here," the dog followed him. Together they climbed down the fire escape, just in time. The door opened and 3 men entered. Outside they hid in the shadows. Shadow moved silently, making no sound. "Where's the FBI?" Elijah whispered. Just then, sirens could be heard in the distance. Agent Williams was coming. When the men in the house heard the sirens, they panicked and started to flee. FBI cars pulled into the street. Agent Williams and his team surrounded the building. "Mr. Brooks, where are you?" "We're here," Elijah shouted from the shadows. Agent Williams found them. "What happened to the guards?" "We don't know. They weren't here when we arrived. This is sabotage. Someone leaked our operation." The next day, the truth came out. Consolidated Steel's lawyers had learned the details of the operation from a connection within the FBI. "There's a mole," said Agent Williams. "One of our own." "Who is it?" asked Elijah. "Agent Thompson. He's been with the FBI for 15 years. Consolidated Steel has been paying him for 5 years." Shadow had sensed Agent Thompson closing in, but they were caught before they could raise the alarm. "What happens now?" "Thompson's been arrested. And we're continuing the operation only with trusted agents now." 2 days later came the grand finale. The FBI conducted simultaneous operations in 4 cities. The Consolidated Steel headquarters in Chicago was raided. Similar raids took place in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. Elijah and Shadow monitored the Chicago operation. Shadow got permission to enter the building. Alongside the FBI agents, the dog helped find the secret documents. "The manager's office," said Agent Williams. "Shadow anything?" The dog was searching the room. He stopped behind the large desk and whimpered softly. "Here," said Elijah. Agent Williams searched the desk. There was a hidden safe behind it. "What's the safe code?" he asked the director. "I don't know." Shadow sniffed the safe and signaled Agent Williams. The dog had detected something. "A listening device," said Agent Williams. "It contains electronics. When the safe was opened, hundreds of secret recordings and documents were found." "Here's the evidence," said Agent Williams. "Operations across the entire country." Shadow wagged his tail. Another successful mission. That evening, the results of the FBI operation were announced. Senior executives were arrested. Companies were investigated for federal crimes, 47 cases of worker rights. Violations were resolved. Millions of dollars in compensation will be paid. Robert Miller and his family spoke at a press conference. Without Mr. Brooks and Shadow, these truths would never have come to light, said Robert. They saved not just me, but all the workers. Janet Miller added, her eyes filled with tears. Shadow is a true hero. That dog didn't just track them down, he found justice. Tony Rizzo had the final words. No one can intimidate workers anymore. Federal laws protect us. Elijah and Shadow did not attend the press conference. They had already left Chicago and were on their way to Louisiana. Inside the pickup truck, they listened to the news on the radio. The major labor rights operation in Chicago has been completed. The FBI continues to investigate similar cases nationwide. In Louisiana, the death of fisherman Joseph Washington continues to be debated. The family's lawyer stated that the local police did not agree with the conclusion that it was an accident. Shadow pricked up his ears. More information about the new assignment was coming in. A week before Washington's death, it was learned that there was a land dispute along the riverbank. A large construction company wanted to take the area used by the fishermen. Local authorities say the land dispute had nothing to do with the death. But the Washington family thinks differently. Elijah looked at Shadow. Same old story, huh, buddy? Powerful companies bullying ordinary people, Shadow barked. It sounded like agreement. Another adventure awaits us in Louisiana. The dog looked out the window. The sun was setting and the long road beckoned them. Justice was served in Chicago, Elijah said. We'll serve it in Louisiana, too. Robert Miller's interview continued on the radio. Mr. Brooks and Shadow brought hope. Every struggling worker should know there are people who will fight for justice. Elijah smiled. You hear that, Shadow? They say we bring hope. The dog wagged its tail. Hope was one of their strongest weapons. Now in Louisiana, a new injustice awaited them. They would seek justice for Joseph Washington and his family, because wherever injustice existed, Elijah and Shadow would be there. The road was long, but their determination was stronger. As the pickup truck headed south, Elijah fell into thought. The workers in Chicago had gotten their rights. Robert Miller was safe. The FBI operation had been successfully completed. It doesn't always turn out this well, he said to Shadow, but we did it in Chicago. The dog looked at him and barked as if to say yes. What awaited them in Louisiana? A fisherman's mysterious death. A land dispute, a powerful construction company. And the indifference of local authorities. Sounds familiar, Elijah said, but every case is different. Every case is a new challenge. Shadow looked out the window. He watched the passing scenery. For the dog, every new assignment meant new smells and new clues. Are you ready, Shadow? Elijah asked. Are you ready to help other people in Louisiana? The dog wagged his tail. He was always ready. The fight against injustice continued. The road from Chicago to Louisiana was a time for Elijah Brooks to think. As they drove along the highway, Shadow sat quietly beside him, occasionally glancing out the window. The dog sensed his new responsibilities. We've accomplished a lot so far, Shadow, Elijah said to his dog. We took down the fake document ring in Millbrook. We rescued Emma in Phoenix. We protected workers' rights in Chicago. Shadow wagged his tail. Each mission meant a new adventure, new smells and new friendships for him. Louisiana news continued on the radio. Fisherman Joseph Washington's family is holding a press conference for an independent investigation. Family attorney Margaret Chen announced that local authorities found the accident conclusion insufficient. Elijah lowered his voice. The Washington family needs our help, Shadow. But first, let's stop by our friends in Chicago one last time. When Miller returned home, Robert and Janet were waiting at the door. Tony Rizzo and the other workers were with them. Robert's face was very different now. The fearful and anxious expression had been replaced by determination and hope. Mr. Brooks, Robert said happily. The FBI operation went great. All the criminals were arrested. The company executives will also face federal court, Tony added. And we workers will get compensation, Janet petted Shadow. None of this would have been possible without this smart dog. Shadow wagged his tail, accepting Janet's affection. The dog had truly bonded with this family. But what's most important, Robert said seriously, is that no one can intimidate the workers anymore. Federal laws now protect us. Agent Sarah Williams also arrived to join the meeting at the house. She provided detailed information about the results of the FBI operation. The Consolidated Steel case will be a turning point in labor rights history, said Agent Williams. 23 company executives were arrested. 7 companies are being prosecuted for federal crimes, and workers in 47 different cases will receive compensation. How much is the total compensation? Asked Tony. $12 million, an average of $250,000 for each affected worker's family. The room fell silent. This money meant a new beginning for many families. They would be able to send their children to college, pay off their mortgages, live better lives. The investigation initiated by Mr. Brooks and Shadow changed the lives of thousands of workers' families, said Agent Williams. This isn't just about money. No company will dare to intimidate workers like this anymore. Elijah bowed his head humbly. I just did what was right. Thanks to Shadow's talents. And we will never forget, said Janet, her eyes brimming with tears. You were a beacon of hope for us. You showed us that even in the deepest darkness, there is hope. That evening at a thank you dinner organized by the workers, Elijah and Shadow were the guests of honor. All the factory workers had come with their families. They filled the Union Hall. The tables were laden with homemade food, cake, and gifts. Robert stood up and made a speech. Friends, we honor Mr. Elijah Brooks and his dog Shadow here today. Without them, we wouldn't be here today. We might never have been here at all. The crowd applauded for a long time. The children rushed to pet Shadow. The dog acted a little shy but kept wagging his tail. He liked the attention. But what's really important, Robert continued, is the lesson we learned from this. We must not remain silent in the face of injustice. We must fight for our rights, and we must never ever forget that we are not alone. Tony also stood up. And we must support each other. Mr. Brooks taught us that alone we are powerless, but together nothing can stop us. When we are united, justice prevails. During the speeches, the workers' wives and children also expressed their gratitude. One woman stood up. Mr. Brooks, my husband doesn't know how to thank you. He worked at that company for 20 years. No one helped him get his rights. You did. An elderly worker added, I have children. They will no longer be ashamed of their father, because their father defended his rights and won. At the end of the meal, the workers presented Elijah with a specially made plaque. It was made of bronze and read, Defender of Workers' Rights, Elijah Brooks and Shadow. Beneath the plaque, in small letters, was the phrase, for heroes who did not remain silent in the face of injustice. I'll share this with Shadow, Elijah said with a smile. He deserves this plaque more than I do. Shadow wagged his tail as if he understood. The children around him continued to love him. At the end of the night, Robert took out his family's old photos. Mr. Brooks, I want to show you something. In the old black and white photos were a young Robert and his family. This is my father. He was a steelworker too. He was fired for standing up for his rights. No one helped back then. But you did. My father would be so proud if he could see this. Janet added, Now our children will know they come from a family that stood up for their grandfather's rights. That sought justice. The next morning it was time to leave Chicago. The Miller family and all their friends came to see them off. They lined the main street holding signs and flowers. Be careful in Louisiana, said Janet. The Joseph Washington fishing case could be dangerous. But I know you and Shadow will succeed. Don't worry, said Elijah. Shadow and I will be careful. Robert shook his hand one last time, this time for much longer. Mr. Brooks, you are a true hero. But more importantly, you are a good man. You taught us that you don't need superpowers to be a hero. You just need to do the right thing. So do all of you, said Elijah. You fought bravely for your rights. I just helped. Tony approached. Mr. Brooks, I'll tell you one last thing. I've spoken to our friends in other cities besides Chicago. In Detroit, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. They talk about you too. The movement you started has spread across the country. Agent Williams added, Tony's right. As the FBI, we've opened 347 new cases nationwide on workers' rights, all thanks to your Chicago case. It spread like ripple effects. As the pickup drove away from Chicago, Shadow watched his friends waving from the back window. The dog would miss them. These people had touched his heart. They were good people, weren't they, Shadow? Elijah said, That's why we do this. For good people like them. On the road heading from Illinois to Louisiana, Elijah followed the news on the radio. There were new developments every hour. The FBI's Chicago operation has led to similar investigations in other states. Labor rights violations are being investigated in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. Initial findings point to the existence of an organized crime network. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, the case of fisherman Joseph Washington continues to dominate the news. It has emerged that Washington had a dispute over his riverside property before his death. Shadow pricked up his ears. More information about his new assignments was coming in. A construction company called Riverside Development Company wanted to build a large marina project on the land where Washington fished. Washington opposed this project and collaborated with local environmental protection associations. Elijah frowned. Same old story, Shadow. Big companies crushing little people. The day after Washington's death, Riverside Development's land purchase offer was automatically accepted. The Washington family doesn't think this is a coincidence. Washington's son, Marcus Washington, is certain his father was murdered. My father was an excellent swimmer. It's impossible he drowned in the river, he says. Shadow pricked up his ears when he heard the name Marcus. It reminded him of someone else, Marcus Jackson from Millbrook. 2 different cities, 2 different Marcuses, but both faced injustice. The Washington family also claims Joseph Washington received threats before his death. Messages like, "If you keep opposing the project, you'll regret it." Elijah took a deep breath. This case could be more dangerous than Chicago, Shadow. Someone actually lost their life here. The dog looked at him, determination in his eyes. Danger had never scared him. Passing through Missouri, they stopped for a break on the side of the road. Elijah let Shadow stretch his legs a bit. As the dog scanned the area, Elijah's phone rang. "Hello, Mr. Brooks? This is Margaret Chen. I'm the Washington family's lawyer." "Hello, Ms. Chen. I was expecting your call. When will you arrive in Louisiana?" "Tomorrow evening." "Why?" "Because I found out the situation is worse than we thought. The people who killed Joseph Washington are still around, and now Marcus Washington is in danger too." Elijah's hair stood on end. "What do you mean?" "Marcus got an anonymous call last night. They said, 'Don't follow in your father's footsteps or you'll meet the same end.'" Shadow sensed the change in Elijah's voice and came over. "Is Marcus safe now?" "For now, yes. But the police aren't taking him seriously. They think it's just a prank call." "We'll be there tomorrow," Elijah said. "Tell Marcus not to be alone with anyone." After hanging up, Elijah looked at Shadow. "Buddy, we're in for some tough days in Louisiana. Are you ready?" The dog wagged his tail. He was always ready. In the afternoon, they crossed into Louisiana. The air was hot and humid, very different from the cold weather in Illinois. The tropical vegetation was very different from the steel structures of the Midwest. "It's another world, Shadow," Elijah said. "Different smells, different sounds. How will you adapt?" Shadow lifted his nose to the air, analyzing the new environment. The humid air, tropical plants, the smell of river water, fish, and the distant scent of salt water. Louisiana's unique blend of smells. River towns were very different from steel factories. Life moved more slowly here. People sat on porches, fished, cruised around in their boats. "It looks peaceful," Elijah said, "but appearances can be deceiving." When they arrived in the New Orleans area, they met up with the Washington family. Elijah had called ahead. The family lived in Joseph Washington's old house, a small but clean house on the riverbank. The house had Louisiana-style architecture, a high porch, colorful paint, and large trees surrounding it. Marcus Washington, a young man of about 25, who looked a lot like his father with strong hands and honest eyes, greeted them at the door. "Mr. Brooks, thank you so much for coming," Marcus said in a sincere voice. "Attorney Chen mentioned you. We want to know the truth about my father." Shadow sniffed Marcus and wagged his tail. This young man was sincere. The dog was very good at reading people. "Marcus, let's talk about your safety first," Elijah said. "You received a threatening phone call." "Yes, but I didn't take it seriously at first. Then when Attorney Chen recommended you, I thought maybe I should take it seriously." Inside, Joseph Washington's wife, Dorothy, about 50 years old, a strong but sorrowful woman, welcomed them warmly. The living room was filled with Joseph's fishing photos and awards. "Mr. Brooks, welcome," Dorothy said. "We don't believe the police's story. Joseph was an excellent swimmer. He fished in this river for 40 years. He knew these waters as well as he knew his own home." "Tell me in detail what happened that night," Elijah said. "Everything, even the smallest details." Marcus replied, "That day, my father was a little more anxious than usual. Riverside Development had called again. They were insisting on selling the land." Dorothy added, "Joseph was very angry. 'This land was my grandfather's,' he said. 'I will never sell it. I grew up on this land. I learned to fish in this river.' He went out fishing in the evening as usual, but this time he said he might be a little late. 'The big fish come late at night,' he always said." "What time did he leave the house?" Elijah asked. "Around 6:30 p.m. He usually came home at 9. But that night he hadn't returned even by 11. Dorothy's voice began to tremble. "We called the police at midnight, but they said, 'Wait until morning, maybe he's staying somewhere else.' He was found dead on the riverbank at 6 a.m. Marcus continued. "The police came, did a quick investigation, said it was an accident, and closed the case. Do you remember which officers came?" "Sheriff Williams and Deputy Jackson. They closed the case very quickly." Elijah took notes. He needed to remember these names. Dorothy began to cry. "Joseph was a very careful man. He never took risks. He always wore a life jacket, never went into dangerous waters alone." Shadow began to wander around the house during the conversation. The dog was trying to pick up Joseph's scent. The house bore traces of this good man in every corner. "Shadow senses something," Elijah said. "Take me out here. Where is Joseph's boat?" They walked to the riverbank. It was a peaceful place. Trees stretched down to the water. Birds chirped. A light breeze rustled the leaves. But for Shadow, it was a crime scene full of clues. Joseph's boat was still there. A small fishing boat, well maintained, clean. The police had examined it but returned it. Shadow prowled around the boat, sniffing every corner. Then he stopped on the shore between the rocks and growled. "What did he find?" asked Marcus. Elijah bent down to look. Among the rocks was a small piece of metal. It looked like a piece broken off from Joseph's watch. "Is this from your father's watch?" Elijah asked. Dorothy approached and examined the piece. "Yes, definitely. Joseph had a gold watch. His father had left it to him. He never took it off." "But how did this get here?" Marcus asked. "If my father fell off the boat, the watch should have gone into the river with him." "Exactly," Elijah said. "This indicates something else." Shadow continued to pace along the shore. The dog had picked up other scents, foreign scents, at least 3 different people. "Shadow is picking up other people's scents," Elijah said. "There were other people here that night." "At least 3. Who could they be?" Dorothy asked. "I don't know, but Shadow can track them." The dog led them away from the shore and toward the main road. There on the grass were tire tracks. The tracks were fresh. "There was a car here," Elijah said. "A big car. A truck, maybe. And very recently." Dorothy began to tremble. "So Joseph really was—" "We're not sure yet," Elijah said in a soothing tone. "But we need to investigate further. And Marcus, you absolutely must be safe. Where will I stay?" "I don't want to stay at home." "You can stay somewhere else temporarily. A friend's house, maybe?" Dorothy added. "Marcus can stay with my sister. She lives in the city." "Good idea," Elijah said. "At least until the investigation is over." The next day they went to the Riverside Development Company's office. A modern building with a river view, expensive. Shadow examined the building from the outside. "Some of these smells are familiar," Elijah said, watching Shadow's reactions. The company manager, Paul Richardson, about 50 years old, wearing an expensive suit and gold watch, overly confident, was not very pleased to receive them. "We had no problem with Joseph Washington," said Richardson. "We were trying to come to a gentlemanly agreement with him." "What kind of agreement?" asked Elijah. "We wanted to buy his land for our marina project." "We offered him a lot of money. 30% above market value. But he didn't accept," said Marcus. "Unfortunately, he refused. But that's definitely not why we killed him." "That's complete nonsense." Shadow sniffed Richardson carefully. The dog had picked up this man's scent on the riverbank too. Very clearly, Elijah noticed Shadow's reaction. "Mr. Richardson, were you at the riverbank that night?" "Of course not." "Why would you ask such a question?" "Just curious." "I was at home that night." "My wife can confirm it." But Shadow's reaction was very clear. This man was definitely at the riverbank. Richardson continued. "Actually, Joseph Washington's death was bad for us too. We couldn't complete the land sale. We had to postpone the project." "So what will happen to the land now?" Marcus asked. "It will go to the legal heirs. So you can sell it if you want." Marcus became angry. "Never." "My father made it very clear that he didn't want it." "I understand your feelings, but business is business. It's not right to make emotional decisions." After leaving the company, Elijah went to the police station. Sheriff Williams, about 45 years old, somewhat skeptical, not very friendly, reluctantly received them. "Mr. Brooks, this case is closed. Joseph Washington drowned accidentally. The file is complete, but the evidence suggests otherwise," Elijah said. He detailed what Shadow had found. "A dog's nose doesn't hold up in court," the sheriff said. "Besides, there's no need to call in the FBI for such a simple case." "But it's at least worth investigating," the sheriff thought for a long time. Then he reluctantly agreed. Fine, I'll take another look. But don't get your hopes up. That evening by the riverbank, Shadow conducted a much more detailed search. The dog entered the water and swam slowly. Swimming in Louisiana rivers was dangerous, but Shadow was experienced. What is he looking for? Asked Marcus. There might be something underwater, Elijah said. Shadow's nose works even underwater. Dorothy was worried. The dog might drown. Don't worry. Shadow is a very good swimmer. The dog searched in the water for about 10 minutes. When he came out of the water, he had a piece of metal in his mouth. A screw that had come loose from Joseph's boat. How did this get underwater? Dorothy asked. Elijah examined the screw. Someone sabotaged the boat. This screw came loose from an important part. When Joseph got on the boat, it was already damaged. So my dad was stranded on the river, Marcus said, most likely. Then he tried to swim for help. But someone stopped him, Dorothy finished. The next day, they went to Sheriff Williams with this new evidence. The sheriff's attitude had changed. He was now taking it more seriously. This evidence is really important, said the sheriff. I'll re-examine the boat. The police technical team examined Joseph's boat piece by piece. The findings were shocking. Several important parts of the engine were deliberately damaged, said the technical chief. The boat broke down after Joseph went out on the river. He got stuck on the river. Then what happened? Asked Elijah. He probably tried to swim for help. But someone stopped him. How? Most likely another boat. They pulled Joseph out of the water, then threw him back in. But this time he was already dead. Dorothy collapsed into a chair, unable to stand. Marcus supported her. So they really killed my dad, Marcus whispered. Thanks to the evidence Shadow found, the Joseph Washington case was officially classified as a homicide investigation. Agent David Thompson from the FBI in New Orleans arrived. He was about 38 years old, serious and professional. Mr. Brooks, I've heard about your success in Chicago, Agent Thompson said. We're going to need your help with this case. After 2 weeks of intense investigation, the truth came out. Paul Richardson and his two partners, the company's security director and a local boatman, had killed Joseph Washington. The plan was simple but effective. They would sabotage Joseph's boat, strand him on the river, then go to rescue him. Joseph would give in to the circumstances and sell the land, but when Joseph tried to swim, they panicked. They pulled him out of the boat, but it was too late. Joseph was dead. We didn't plan to kill him, Richardson said in court. We just wanted to scare him. We needed him for the land project. But he stubbornly refused, so we tried other ways. The outcome is the same, said Marcus Washington, watching his father's killers stand trial. You killed my father. Richardson received a 25-year prison sentence. His accomplices got 15 years each. Justice has been served, said Agent Thompson, thanks to Mr. Brooks and Shadow. After his father's killers were caught, Marcus Washington thanked Elijah. Mr. Brooks, you and Shadow brought justice for my father, Marcus said. It won't heal us, but at least we know the truth. Dorothy petted the dog. Shadow, you're an excellent detective. Joseph is watching you with pride. Shadow wagged his tail. Another mission had been successfully completed. What will you do now? Asked Marcus. What do you think about the land? Asked Elijah. I'll do as my father wanted. The land won't be sold. I'll protect it. Future generations will be able to fish here too. Dorothy smiled. That's what Joseph wanted. He wanted nature to be protected. Excellent decision, said Elijah. Your father is looking down on you with pride. Before leaving Louisiana, Elijah and Shadow visited Joseph Washington's grave. The headstone read, Beloved husband and father, river fisherman, guardian of nature. Rest in peace now, Joseph, Elijah said quietly. The killer has been found. The land is safe. The family is safe. Shadow sat beside the grave, paying silent respect. The dog sensed the bond between the living and the dead. On the road leaving Louisiana, Elijah fell into thought. Every case is different, Shadow, he said. Fake documents in Millbrook, child abduction in Phoenix, labor rights in Chicago, murder in Louisiana. But they all have one thing in common. Shadow looked at him, listening. Powerful people try to crush the powerless, but when we're there, injustice can't win. And together we always succeed. You track, I investigate. We're a perfect team. The news came on the radio. Louisiana murder solved. Company executives who killed fisherman Joseph Washington receive heavy sentences. Experienced veteran and his trained dog played key role in solving case. Elijah turned down the radio. They didn't say anonymous this time. There's progress. Shadow looked out the window. The road was long, but together the two of them could handle any challenge. In the evening, while stopping for gas, Elijah heard his phone ring. Hello? Mr. Brooks? Do you remember me? I'm Robert Miller from Chicago. Of course, Robert. How are you? Very well, but I have some bad news for you. Elijah tensed. What happened? Tony Rizzo called me. There's a similar case in Detroit. A labor leader has gone missing. A man named Marcus Johnson, the union president. Is the FBI aware? Not yet, but we need your help. We need Shadow's abilities. Elijah looked at Shadow. The dog listened to the conversation, sniffing out a new mission. Robert, we're leaving Louisiana. How far is Detroit? About 8 hours. You could be there overnight. Okay, give me the address. After hanging up, Elijah turned to Shadow. New mission, buddy. Another missing person in Detroit. Shadow wagged his tail. He was always ready. We never get to rest, do we? Elijah said with a smile. The dog barked as if to say, this is our job. The pickup started heading towards Detroit. In the evening darkness, the two heroes were once again going to fight injustice. Shadow, Elijah said, do you ever get tired of this job? Shadow looked at him and wagged his tail. Tiredness wasn't in the dog's vocabulary. There was only the mission. You're right, Elijah said. Wherever there is injustice, there must be people to stop it. And we are those people. As the night journey continued, music played on the radio. Peaceful moments, but they both knew a new challenge awaited them in Detroit. What kind of case could it be? Elijah wondered aloud. There was a plot against a labor union leader in Chicago. It could be something similar in Detroit. Shadow looked out the window. The night scenery rushed by. Or something else, Elijah continued. Maybe organized crime. Maybe politics. We don't know. But we'll find out. The dog looked at him full of trust. Whatever Elijah said, Shadow believed him. You know, Shadow, someone once asked me, why do you do this? Back then I didn't know the answer. Now I do. Because if we don't, who else will? Marcus Jackson, Robert Miller, Joseph Washington, who would hear their voices? Shadow barked. It was like approval. You and me, Shadow. We were their voices, and we will continue to be. When the sun rose, they arrived in Detroit. New city, new mission, new case of injustice, but Elijah and Shadow were ready. They were always ready. Elijah and Shadow's fight against injustice never ends. A new case awaits them in Detroit. This brave duo is always ready, always standing tall against injustice. If this story moved you, subscribe and share your own experiences with justice in the comments.